You said that the trick to getting people to go green is never to talk about the environment. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of examples of that, but it comes back to my kind of original premise about the kinds of stories you want to tell. People don't, I think it's kind of like historically proven now, there's a small percentage of people who are motivated to take actions in their daily lives to live more sustainably. In my view, the proportion of the population probably anywhere in the world that does that hasn't changed over decades. Some will, most definitely will not, right? So if you want to get someone to adopt a green behavior, I think there's plenty of ways to do that that are just far more effective. Years ago, I had this radio show called The Lazy Environmentalist. And so this was like a classic case, which was based on me because I was running this modern design green furniture company. I was very into like really beautiful design, environmentally responsible materials. I was dedicating my whole life to trying to get this business off the ground, so much so that I was living in New York City where all rents are really expensive and I couldn't afford a retail store and an apartment. So I turned my apartment into my retail store and I lived in it because I was just like, I'm going to make this thing work. And my first employee called me out since we were working out of my apartment. She's like, you're just the worst environmentalist I've ever met. You're always in the shower, barely recycle, like you're selling all this stuff, but you're a giant hypocrite. So that was true. So I wrote this blog about myself called The Lazy Environmentalist, and one thing led to another, and it became a radio show and then a TV show. And it was awesome. But what I learned in doing that, I wanted to do a show about also eco-friendly cars. So it was 2007. There were no eco-friendly cars, like a Toyota Prius, and that's a boring car. So I found this guy in Oregon who's a drag car racer, and he had a little tiny 1972 Datsun that he called the White Zombie, and he went by the name Plasma Boy. And Plasma Boy would race the White Zombie, and he set the speed record for the quarter-mile lap at the drag racing track in Oregon. That's how I found him. And he comes on the show, and he's like, Josh, you wouldn't believe it. 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds, 800 pounds of torque. I blew the doors off this Corvette the other night, and I went up to the driver. I'm like, how do you feel about the fact that I just kicked your butt with a car running on American-made energy? And he was like, it was unbelievable. And then all of a sudden in our tiny little radio show, which was live on Sirius XM, so broadcast across North America, it's mostly like truck drivers and their 18-wheelers who are listening. Some probably like accidentally landed on our channel, but they started calling in and talking to this guy. And they're like, man, I want to get that. How'd you do that? I want to get that for my pickup truck. Tell me like, how did you DIY this thing? And what I realized in that moment was like, nobody calling into this little tiny eco show is an environmentalist, but they're all excited about the environmental solution. None of the story we're talking about is about saving the planet. It's about speed, torque, domestically made energy, all the things that many, many people care about. So why not talk about that?
Love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think, do you think like people are slightly tired of listening about like going green? I mean, I remember since I was in primary school, it's like all about, if we don't, do this in 10 years time, it's going to be the end of the world. Obviously, 10 years later, we didn't hit the target and it wasn't the end of the world. It sometimes feels like, the prophecies that, there's going to be the end of the world in 2012 or something like that Maya's predicted. So do you think people get like tired of that and that's why we shouldn't be talking about it? Like, or is it like all just talking about great stories and completely forgetting about this green stuff?
Well, let me. So to your first premise, yes, people are absolutely tired of talking about it, and there's plenty of research that backs that up. I think it was Reuters who came out with a study in 2023 that said, yeah, people don't want to hear about climate data because either they feel scolded, the message, like you're saying, the message never changes. They just tune it out for a whole bunch of reasons. Either it's like it's too heavy, right? I don't want to be told that like it's just doomsday. Or like you said, it hasn't happened, so like I'm tuning it out. Or it's just too much, right? And there's all these other things I'd rather focus on. What the research then says is like you should talk about solutions. Very few people actually talk about solutions. But what I have found is that it's really sequencing. And I'll tell you what I mean. I'll give you one other example. If you go on probably the best known most environmentally responsible company in the world today is, or one of them at least, is Patagonia, the clothing company. Right, just this incredible reputation, and they also have incredible clothes, and they last forever, and right, so they're really great, high quality clothing. If you go on Patagonia.com today and you want to shop for a fleece, you'd go on the page for the fleece, and you would see new fleece, and then you'd see a window that says, "Do you want to buy a reused fleece?" Right there, you have that option. Okay, so that's cool. It's reused. It would cost less. The company that actually does that for Patagonia, that gets it onto the page, is called Trove. And it was started years ago by two amazing business people who were also, really into sustainability. One was the first chief sustainability officer for Walmart. The other, I think, was the youngest executive director ever for the Sierra Club, and had a really, great sustainable career, this guy, Adam Warbach. And they made some progress, but then when they needed to scale, they brought in this guy who ran Nordstrom Rack, like this off-brand discount, like $1.5 billion business, just straight up, let's get you cheap stuff. He came into the company and he said to the company, he's like, okay, this company, I don't know if you guys ever saw Fight Club with Brad Pitt, but the first rule of Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. So he came into this like environmentally minded company. He was like, okay, the first rule of Trove, you don't talk about climate, right? Like, to any of our customers, you're going to talk about, great margins because they're going to get this stuff back, very cheaply. You're going to talk about really low customer acquisition costs because people just love to buy this stuff and you don't have to, advertise it a lot. You're going to have, you're going to talk about, stronger margins. You're going to talk about stronger lifetime value for brands, Patagonia and others. And then once it all works, everybody's going to celebrate the reuse. Everybody's going to celebrate the sustainability. The brands that we sell to, they're going to celebrate it because the technology works, the product works, the economics work. Then everybody loves talking about climate. But you have to get it. You have to make the sell first and prove the value first on the things people really care about. Then you talk about it and then you celebrate it because now everybody's on board.